What is up, ladies and gentlemen? How are you all doing this evening? Welcome to another exciting episode of Cucumber Reviews, but with a little bit of a twist, because this is entitled First Impressions, and this is going to be me. I don't know if I'm going to make this a full series, but this is basically going to be me talking about like my first impressions of a TV show or a movie, or just like from movie trailers to whatnot. But I really wanted to do this talking about actually my first impressions of the new Bel-Air show, which is now streaming on Peacock. I don't know if they have the full series or just the first episode, but I went and watched the first episode yesterday. I actually knew that this was coming for a while, but I actually didn't know if it was going to be a thing or not, because I just seen the trailer in like maybe 2019, maybe late 2018, and I was like, oh my gosh, is this actually going to be a real thing? Even though like I never heard anything about it again. And I remember seeing interviews about Will Smith talking about like, oh, this would be awesome as a drama, and about how I think it's the guy who's playing Will, or maybe it's the guy who wrote it, you know, he had liked The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and he had always imagined what it would be like as a very strict drama. And that's basically what this is. Now, I grew up on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. By grew up, I mean like whenever I was at my babysitter's, and sometimes she would have it on in the background, and I would catch it from every now and again. But I started watching it when I was maybe throughout all middle school to high school. Around like 7 or 6 o'clock, like 2, 3 to 4 episodes would come on one after the other, and I eventually was able to watch the entire series. I'm pretty sure I've seen the whole entire series at least 2 or 3 times, because, and they probably still do this now, maybe, I don't know, I don't watch really TV anymore except whenever's on Netflix. But a series would start with the first episode, and then once the whole series concluded, they would just start it all over again. They did it with Charmed on TNT. I don't know if they still do that. They did that a lot. So I actually got a very good glimpse of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I knew all the actors, all the episodes, all the characters, their personalities, and I just really grew to like the show, and I would even have it on as background music, or just background noise for whenever I was doing something. So my first impressions of this are actually very positive. I actually do not have that many negative things to say, and I'll get into like my negatives like near the end of the video. But first and foremost, this is actually very good. I really liked the first episode. The acting is very good. I believe everybody in this. They've turned everything basically up to an 11, especially Carlton. I cannot wait to get to him. Now, one of the things that I actually enjoyed about this is they actually went more in depth about Will's backstory and what his life was like in Philadelphia. Because, you know, like in the original show, like you would get the full intro, like throughout the maybe first, second episode, or at the beginning of each season, you would get like the full thing. And like, you know, it just told us what his life was like in Philly. And, you know, the reason why he got sent to Philly, or he got sent to LA, was because he got in one little fight. His mom got scared, so she, you know, you're moving in with your auntie and uncle in Bel-Air. So they went into like a much bigger depth about that, and I like that. You know, like they went into like how good he is at basketball, and he's doing pretty good in school. They showed like how he had a bright future ahead of him, and then spoilers, something happens, and I like how they actually took that whole entire thing of you're here for a better education, and they twisted it. Now they did say in the original that he got in a fight with this like bad guy, and that's why his mom moved him there, and that, I guess if you could say that was kind of it. They never really went into anything else. But with this, it's, oh no, like it's a lot deeper than that. And so him going to Bel-Air for a better education is just a cover-up, versus you're here because if you go back to Philly, you're gonna die. And I was like, holy crap, you know, that's a really interesting twist. It's more personal, and you just get kind of more of a vibe to what Will's life was like before he came to LA. So I like that. They made it a much more serious notion, and it was just something that was really, really welcomed. Now, they actually also do this thing where they actually introduce later characters already in this first episode. Now, by later characters, I only mean one, and that's Lisa. Lisa didn't show up until like, I don't know what season it was, but she didn't show up till much later, and they actually had her in like this Kappa group. Like she was wanting to get into this group of girls that hated Will because like he dated all of them and broke their hearts or whatever. And Carlton was a part of it because, of course. So then we actually get to I will say, the characters. Now, probably at the moment my favorite character in the show, other than Will, is actually his Aunt Viv. Now, one thing I actually think that they didn't do that well on in the original series is they never really touched up on what Viv's life was like in Philadelphia. And, like, you know, they never really showed her side of that. Like, you know, in this, as soon as, like, she meets Will, she's like, oh, there's that Philadelphia flair I miss so much. And they actually, like, had her talk about it, and you got to see a different side of Aunt Vivian, and I really liked that, because they never really showed that unless she was around her sisters, which I hope that we get to see them. So I really liked that. And it's almost like, you know, Aunt Vivian is the only door to Philadelphia that he has left. Because he can, at the moment, he can never go back. Because he asks his Uncle Phil, how long am I here? And he's like, until further notice. So we have no idea when he's going to be able to go back. And his Aunt Vivian plus his mom is his only ties back to his original life. Now, they also did introduce Ice Tray. Now, Ice Tray was a friend of his from back in the day, and in the show, Ice Tray basically kept Will from being bullied. You can tell I know a lot about the show. He kept him from being, like, you know, beaten up and stuff. Like, they showed their friendship too. And actually how they introduced Jazz was really weird as well. They actually have Jazz being the cab driver in the show. So I was like, okay, alright. I kind of always got the idea that Jazz was the... Now, I could be wrong, but I kind of got the idea that Jazz was a friend of his from Philly. And actually, I even think if you go back and watch the original intro, he's there with Will playing basketball in Philly. So they just brought, like, a lot of characters who would come in later, and by a lot I mean like only one so far. They just brought in Lisa, and that was it. Now, another character that I kind of didn't like at first was Uncle Phil. And the thing is, with Uncle Phil, like, when Will first arrives, you know, like, you almost kind of get like this, I'm very embarrassed by you. But later on they reveal why he acted that way, and then later on, when him and Will are talking, you get that love and contempt, because he says, I have always had love and contempt for that boy. I've always tried to be there when his father wasn't, and I like that they touched on that, but at first I didn't like it. I was like, I never got that feeling. Yes, he was always very strict on Will, and he had a very commanding presence. But Uncle Phil was Uncle Phil. This guy does a good job with what he's given. I don't really get that I do get that intimidating sense, but not as in like he's like almost 7 feet and he could literally eat you. No, this is kind of like he just has that respect. There's a type of respect that he carries, and it is very intimidating. Like, he is a very serious man that you do not want to cross. So I really enjoyed that dynamic. It was something different. Then we get to the siblings. Now, I'm going to save Carlton for last. I was really curious what they were going to do with Hillary, because, like, you know, in the show, Hillary is always like this fashion-obsessed, basically a fashion-obsessed airhead who dropped out of college and was afraid to tell her mom because she was always afraid that her mom had this standard that she could never live up to. Man, I have not watched this show in years, and I know this show. I have watched this so many times. But, like, you know, and it's in the modern times. You know, I was really wondering, okay, is this going to be like, you know, back in the day, or is it going to be in the modern times? And it's in the modern times. They have made her this TikTok blogger, but she's also a chef. And I never really sensed a dynamic between Aunt Vivian and Hillary in the original, but in this, you can tell there is some kind of dilemma going on between these two, and I was really interested with that. I was like, oh, okay, I'm digging this. I'm really enjoying this. I would say probably the one character that I kind of didn't like might have been Ashley, but I don't know. Maybe like I'll enjoy her, like, you know, throughout the rest of the series once I actually watch it. Like, you know, they kind of had her be like, she's this environmentalist kind of, and I'm so used to seeing, like, Ashley being, like, you know, the little cousin who would always follow Will around, because that's also, like, that was their dynamic. That was their relationship. She was very impressed by him, and she always wanted to be around him. He had an impression on her, or vice versa. And she just always wanted to be around him. She always looked up to him. But in this, it's different. I understand you got to change things. I just really miss that dynamic, because it honestly kind of seemed like, out of the siblings other than Carlton, Ashley was kind of the one that he had a better relationship with. But maybe I'll like her later on. Jeffrey, they didn't really do much. Now, they didn't really do much with him either in the first episode. I love his snarkiness. It is so dang funny. So many favorite jokes with him. I loved the guy who played Jeffrey in the original. He was so funny, such a sarcastic, smart mouth. And it was just funny. He was sarcastic with everybody, especially with Uncle Phil's weight. Now, the biggest one that I was very impressed by and someone also felt very uncomfortable with is Carlton. Carlton is almost the only one in the family who is not happy that Will is here. Now, I got that first impression with Uncle Phil, but later on he changed. With Carlton, you can tell right from the get-go, it's like, he's almost like the Percy Weasley of this show. Because, like, you know, in the books, Percy Weasley was always somebody like, you know, you gotta follow the rules, I want this reputation, my family doesn't follow, I'm very embarrassed by them. And, like, throughout the whole entire episode, Carlton's like, as long as you don't embarrass my family, as long as he doesn't embarrass us. He has a very, very strong reputation. And you can tell that Will and Carlton, they are gonna butt heads. And there's even, like, a moment when he's like, alright, look, we don't gotta like each other, we don't gotta get along, but we've gotta at least make it look like we're getting along for Aunt Viv, so it doesn't drive her crazy. And for a moment it works, but then something happens and he snaps, and like you can tell like things are gonna get very heated, and I'm very looking forward to that to see what they do, because there's always this dynamic of, you know, Carlton's living his own life and Will is still representing his life back in Philadelphia. And, like, you know, they are kind of, like, you know, talking about, like, you know, race and stuff like that, where, like, Carlton and his friends are saying a certain word that I'm not going to say. And Will got very upset by that and, like, you know, was very confrontational. And he was like, how are you going to let some guy say that around you? And stuff like that. So, like, you can tell these are two very different people from two very different worlds, and they do not get along. And they touched on that in the first episode of the original, especially with him and his Uncle Phil, because he said, you know, you forgot who you are and where you came from. And Uncle Phil was like, no, I haven't. I have not forgotten who I am. I have not forgotten where I came from. And that was kind of really all they did. Now, they did have Will make jokes about how short Carlton is, and basically kind of how, and I'm probably wrong, and I'm probably going to get some hate mail for this, but it was kind of like Will was basically saying to Carlton, you're not really black. You're not really black. I'm more black than you'll ever be. And they always kind of had that dynamic of Will basically saying that you're not really this person that you're trying to be, and Carlton always trying to prove that he is. And they even dealt with that with other people. Eventually Will dropped that, and then when they were trying to get into this sorority, Carlton was like, you know, being black isn't what I'm trying to do, it's what I am. And you can tell that these two have very different views on things, and they just butt heads. And the way that the episode ended was great. So I'm very interested to see where these character dynamics are going to go. I'm very interested to see what it's going to be like with Carlton. Very interested. And I also liked what they did with the dynamic with Lisa, having actually Lisa and Carlton actually had dated, and so he kind of holds some hostility towards her, and towards her being near Will, and even have more hostility towards Will. I thought that was very interesting. It turned my head. I was like, oh my gosh, where's this going? I really enjoyed that. And I'm also going to say the cinematography in the show is great. I really liked how they filmed it, especially like the shots of, you know, like we've all seen, like, you know, if you've seen it, there's a picture of him sitting in a throne with this big crown, and they actually did this really cool shot of like Will in a pool falling and the crown slipping from his head. And I was like, I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed this first episode. I think the only issue that I had, it kind of settled itself. I'm gonna have to finish watching it if they've not released the whole entire season, or if it's just the first episode, of the dynamic with Uncle Phil, because I never got the feeling that Uncle Phil was embarrassed that Will was even there, and that he was always, even though he was very strict and stern, he cared about Will and Will's future. And at first I didn't get that impression, but that's probably going to change. Guys, put in the comments below, have you seen the first episode of Bel-Air? I really want to know. Don't forget to elbow drop the like button and spear the subscribe button to check out more of my content. And if you want me to do more first impressions, please let me know. I will happily do this. Guys, also, don't forget to go check out the YouTube channel known as Liponic Studios. I am actually a part of them. They have a lot of fan-made films. It's a theater group, or it's a a fan-made film group who are doing a lot of projects. We actually just wrapped up on a Halloween project called Halloween Revelation, which I'm in, and some of my friends from the theater, and a friend of mine that I actually did pro wrestling with is in. Do not forget to check them out. Jeremy played Michael Myers, and it is all done by Malik Barnes. Great work. He is a great director. He's a great writer. He is very talented for his craft. Go check out our page. Go check out our page and our channel and all our other projects. Guys, have a good day, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.